maybe one good example could be the new Avatar film that I don't think anyone cared to see, because even though you can have everything in 3D multiplex, uh, flying, whatever it is, you still
Mm.
have to have some connection to the story, or have something that you would care about, right? Like, hey, I can't wait to see what happens to that Frodo guy because he's
Mm.
doing some task I'm interested in him doing, even though that's fake too, right? But apparently you can't just kind of have spectacle mean as much anymore.
Yeah, I think there is something to it. I mean, perhaps there is a set of cardinal rules that kind of apply everywhere. Like maybe the glue is the audio channel, right? Maybe John Williams, is necessary to kind of connect, an almost non-existent shark, in the first Jaws movie, to an excellent story and kind of make an excellent impression, right? Mike, nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Jack. It's as always we get to talk about the weather, but it's sunny and cold. So I'm like in the midst of like trying to hide from the sun, but yet it's freezing. So welcome to January in Chicago, right?
Yeah. January is, but it was not so bad so far. So, um,
Not so bad.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
and there's snow on the ground again, so that's always kind of fun. Although
yeah.
um someone was saying they went cross country skiing, but I don't know. You probably have stuff like that near you, right? Sort of
Yeah. I
winter
do a little bit.
activities.
I do a little bit of cross-country skiing, but there is not enough snow on the ground right now.
Yeah.
But maybe in Wisconsin, but yeah, hard to tell.
Yeah. Also, it's not. I don't think it's as good when it's this cold, right? It needs to be a little fluffier or something, right? Because otherwise it's icy. I don't know anything about snow. Never mind.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
though I've
Yeah. The coefficient of fluffiness is important. Yes.
exactly. You don't want to you don't want to be on ice. I guess you need a
Mm,
different kind of ski for that
mm,
one.
mm,
So this week I've got a few things. I guess I could use your take on it because I'm sort of stuck. I've got like 5 topics that
mm.
I'm trying to do some pieces about, and all of them are okay, right? But I'm still struggling a little bit, trying to figure out how to build them into something more interesting. So maybe I could just go through some of these, and I'll start with the one that maybe I think is the most interesting, but I'm having a hard time describing my take. But the topic is art, right, or visuals.
Mm.
And I think we all started, maybe at least for me, part of the real initial thrill of AI when it first came out was DALL-E. I don't know if that. I guess it's still around, but whatever. DALL-E was kind of well, it was sort of extraordinary, right? Because you could talk about
Mm.
uh, I don't know, penguins running airplanes or something like that, and it would produce something of penguins flying airplanes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know where we've gone, but that's where I'm wondering, maybe that's something to unpack because what I consider to be kind of the inner flaw of these things is they're pretty good, right? Like if you were going to
Mm.
do penguins flying airplanes as an artist, we don't do New Yorker cartoons, but you know what I mean. You would probably do it with a point to it, right? Like there'd be some joke, and you would do it appropriate to the tone of what you were trying to convey, right? It might just be a
Yeah.
line drawing. It might just be, does this make
Mm.
sense? It's like, so they were so tonally out of whack, right? They were way too good for
Mm.
the idea behind them.
Yeah.
I mean, does this make sense? Like, there's this tonal mismatch that it's not as bad with text, although it was bad with that as well, right? Like, it would over explain things, and I think that's still an aspect of the technology that we really haven't wrestled, right? Is that you gotta like tell it a lot more context of who cares, or who's going to read or deal with this. I don't know. How is this for? It's a topic I'm trying to write about, but
Yeah, I'm running into something like that, maybe in a little bit, maybe less artistic, but more visualization thing,
Mhm.
kind of aspect to it, where I'm asking AI to generate a visualization for a data set for
Okay.
me, right? And I would like to have an answer, but also I would like to have a graph. And usually what the AI is defaulting to is it's going to start building a matplotlib Python library, and then it's going to look at the columns and rows and kind of do the bar chart or something like that as an execution of the Python code that was generatively created with respect to the schema that I gave it. So I think that there is an extra step here that is explicit in my case, which is that, let's say, AI is defaulting to a matplotlib library, which is basically a very basic Python library. So it's not like very visual attractive. But if I wanted to make it more attractive, I would say, hey, let's not do matplotlib. Maybe let's do Seaborn library, which has those kind of capabilities to do those kind of like biologically inspired shapes, and all that stuff that kind of looks a little bit like like squids, and
Sure.
octopuses,
Yeah.
octopi or whatever. So I think that what you are talking about is that maybe in those applications that you are using, if you create a prompt, that's the same thing that I'm doing. And then there is this, in my case, it was a Python code that generated, a library or used a library, but maybe that is kind of embedded in the system that you're using. And it happens that it's just a high res output with a certain palette and certain kind of visual stylistic, aspect to it that can be actually, if there was knob, probably you could kind of turn those knob and maybe go into a line art or something like that. So I think it's just an implicit layer that you are dealing with.
Well, I think to that point, I'll go back to early project I did a long time ago. It had to do with medicine, right? So I'm trying to gather information about a patient's care, especially how they feel. And maybe this is interesting, but someone's going to assess them, and we're going to talk about pain because this is palliative care, so that you're not on your
Mm,
way, you're on your way out. Sorry,
mm,
palliative people. But it's still just data coming in from assessments. And then I wanted to chart it. And what I ended up doing is I wanted to make it real, right? Like I could draw a picture of what charts look like, but I always found that to be ridiculous because it's like, just make a chart, right? Give it some data. You just go ahead and do it because then you'll get to the next step, which is to see, hey, is this any good? Right? Because I can always show you a graph and it'll always look good. Sorry, this is
mm,
years of frustration working with designers and graphs, right? Like it will always look good if you just draw it, and it will almost never look good in reality
mm.
because you never know, right? The range can be it's like the old thing of charts where you see a chart that goes way up, but then you realize the scale is like 10 to 10.2, right? Like
Mm.
you need there's proportions, and maybe we'll go back to my earlier point, which is context, proportions, context, right? They're synonymous,
Yeah.
sort of. Well, either way, so what I did is I just got stock charts and I just put all the data into a stock chart viewer because they were around and it's just a piece of code, right? And all you need to do is to instantiate it and put it on your web page, and then you give it the data. And so I prototyped it,
Mm,
um, and it was fine. What actually was interesting wasn't the visualization of the data, but it was the capture of the data that turned out to be actually the tricky part because everyone would capture it in a different way. So, hello, everyone in healthcare, it's a rough gig. Like
yeah.
anytime you're trying to reduce something to a number, it things get very
Mm,
weird.
yeah.
Um, Different topic. But yeah, I think what it thinks of, and you're right, it's pretty quick to start relying upon, again, different libraries and such that may or may not look good. But I think what my question about this topic, right, is the picture of the penguin flying the plane. It
Mm.
looks good, yet it's tonally inappropriate, right? So your graph, like you said, doesn't look good, but is it tonally appropriate? Meaning sometimes things that look crappy get people to actually look at what it's saying rather than
Yeah.
being immediately attractive, right? Because, that's sort of like I've got one of these watches, you know what I
Mm.
mean? It's pretty attractive, but it has very distinct limitations, right? It's going to be like, it can be annoying or it could be whatever, I mean, it's a tiny screen. I don't know.
Mm.
I guess the reason maybe this is the bigger topic that might interest more people is the same thing is happening with media, especially film, right? Like we kind of have gotten over the fact that in any one frame of a film, there's a million things going on and a million things blowing up and whatever, and it's sort of
Mm.
like, yeah, you know. Whereas, the train coming toward the viewer back in the 1800s, people were running out of the way in fear, even though it was kind of obvious that it wasn't a real train. People had never really experienced that before. So the thing is but that novelty wears off quickly, right?
Yeah.
Or at
Yeah.
least in exposure, we become much less impressed. And obviously that takes time, right? I don't think I think maybe one good example could be the new Avatar film that I don't think anyone cared to see, because even though you can have everything in 3D multiplex, uh, flying, whatever it is, you still
Mm.
have to have some connection to the story. Or have something that you would care about, right? Like, hey, I can't wait to see what happens to that Frodo guy because he's,
Mm.
doing some task I'm interested in him doing, even though that's fake too, right? But apparently you can't just kind of have spectacle mean as much anymore.
Yeah, I think there is something to it. I mean, perhaps there is a set of cardinal rules that kind of apply everywhere. Like maybe the glue is the audio channel, right? Maybe John Williams, is necessary to kind of connect, an almost non-existent shark, in the first Jaws movie, to an excellent story and kind of make an excellent impression, right? Or maybe in the Alien movie, the story is about not showing the alien too much because then your brain is actually gonna make you scared, and with wonderful music again in that or audio in that movie as well. Maybe that was the glue. So it's it's hard to define those things, but it seems like too much of a great thing is actually not working in visualizations and static art and motion picture and perhaps what you are talking about is that level of kind of like appropriate engagement, right? Is kind of like a maybe something that is might be very personal. Like for example, myself, I actually love looking at ASCII visualization, ASCII
Yeah,
graphics.
sure.
You
Those are
know,
all fun. Yeah.
extremely maybe because I work most of the time in a Linux command line window, and that's kind of a very
Oh,
native
right.
to,
The
to
little
me,
splash
right?
screens that come up when you start up things, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, right. But perhaps for another generation that is maybe growing up looking at Apple screens and Apple Watch is really the only one that they ever had, that might be a different level of perception, right?
Well, I think it goes back to maybe the bigger topic about AI, right, is that it's really hard for it to proxy this tone, right? And if you're really
Yeah.
going for tone, it's also very, I think, challenging to describe. So you're getting into this thing of like, hey, I'm going to be an art maker, and this has been my life, right? Like I tried as a kid to be an artist because I was inspired by X, Y, and Z, right? And I loved all these different things and I wanted to do them. So I made films and I drew and all the fun things that you
Mhm.
could do when you have time. And I will just say the best of my knowledge, I was bad at most of them, right? Like I could tell, like I was definitely not on par as to the things that I liked. And sooner or later, the more I learned about art, the more I learned that the things that I could do may not be around the idea of of this what can you call it, like uh, I'm talking about skill build, like practice. You know what I mean? It takes just practice, right? It's just like saying I have this great idea for a guitar song. I need to first learn to play the guitar. It would not be expedient. You know what I mean? Like your idea would be long gone by the time you learned how to play the guitar to play it. But because we have aids now, right? I think you could just go in and say, "Oh yeah, it's D," and you can fake a guitar now with almost any app
Yeah.
on my Apple Watch. I can probably pretend to play a guitar because it's the model of it's pretty good, right? We understand how guitars work, and we understand also that when you're playing the fake guitar, that it's not out of tune. There's all these other things, right? That are actually, I think, where my article's going is what we appreciate sometimes is all the fallibility and the noise in something. And I think to your chart example, right? Like things, things are not a chart. You see what I mean? Like a chart is just kind of, well, I always say the goal of any visualization. Do you remember my cool line about this? Is you get 1 second. That's it. Like this is how much attention span you need to get something across in a chart, and you don't get much more because there isn't any more there, right? So unless the chart is somehow interactive or has some question that you're trying to get at, that's where I think most people just let it fall, right? Like if I see that my stock portfolio price is going up, I'm fine, and when it's going down, it's bad. You see what I mean? Like it isn't the chart. It's sort of my feeling about the chart that is needed, but it doesn't take time, right? It's not time consuming. Whereas I think composing and making art is really time consuming to most people's chagrin, but it's not unpleasant. I mean, it's kind of fun as long as you're not on a schedule or need to have 3 ideas out by tomorrow. And that's where I'm kind of thinking AI can come in because it can do crummy work quickly. That's the basic thing. Like it can do okay stuff pretty quickly, which could then give you a little bit of a leg up if you're in a very deadline driven world, but it's not going to help you much if you're trying to be good at something.
Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me a little bit of a kind of analogy to this. Well, there might be something that is kind of like a trigger to the creativity, like things start clicking, and I remember the documentary about the rock band Rush, from Canada,
Sure.
and in their early days. Alex Lifeson was the guitarist. Geddy Lee, he was the bassist and the vocalist. And their very early kind of basement recordings, they were not good. They were just banging the guitars, not really kind of like maybe an equivalent of somebody picking up a pencil and trying to make some sort of a drawing, but it really was not clicking, right? I mean, maybe they had the skill, they had an interest, everything was kind of like aligned there, but really there was no team, right? I mean, it was not a good picture musically speaking, right? And then maybe somebody showed up, like the drummer, like Neil Peart, right? Unfortunately he passed away, but he was very widely regarded as one of the best drummers, and maybe he was the kind of the spark that kind of like the guitar started sounding great because the guitarist was playing with the drummer, and Geddy Lee, his bass and his vocals started sounding great because he was singing to the drummer, and the drummer was a genius, right? And so there is, but there is this spark, in the system. So perhaps that's kind of something that is maybe happening to people, right? I mean, if you are doing, let's say drawing, maybe the spark would be to look at maybe Frank Lloyd Wright, architecture or something, or maybe look at Hugh Ferris, the famous, pencil drawings, like it's kind of like this almost cyberpunkish style of rendering buildings, in the heavy pencil Hugh Ferris style. So maybe looking at that could be like a spark that will kind of awaken the human kind of interest, and suddenly you start kind of drawing things that you're beginning to like, and maybe your brain aligns with it, right? Or maybe the same will happen with the AI, right? Like you will show the AI the right context, and it's going to be now what's going to be producing is going to be in the level of appropriateness that you are talking about, kind of originally. So yeah, maybe it's about the trigger, right?
Well, and I think that brings up maybe where I certainly have used AI, and I know Canva, you probably heard of Canva, as kind of a newcomer to this space, and it's doing a good job because it's sort of positioned itself as not Adobe, right? So Adobe has been the land of these products where the professionals have to learn a fairly complex piece of software in order to be able to do whatever you need to do, right? So much like at least in my world, my experience and my passion is always about designing interfaces, right? So it's this feeling of like, how hard can something be versus how powerful is it, right? So personally, that's my interest in AI, right? Like it's very powerful without being hard to use. So you had me immediately, but now that you have more power, see what I mean? Then it's other problems. Everything's now another problem. But I remember using Canva because for many reasons we had to get out a lot of things that look good, like art, little tiles or something that had a visual flair to it. Also, it's fun to get paid because people like what you see, because they also give it like 1 second. Here's the web page. Here's, you worked on this for a month. As long as it looks good at first glance, you probably will be paid. Otherwise, people will say, God, it just really needs something. And then you're in another world, right? Which is not true maybe of people who put graphs out there, but should be, right? It's like, is this it? Is this the best graph you could come up with? Anyway, graph people always get away with. Anyway, the reason I brought it up is that there's a lot of people who aren't very well trained in, say, illustration. I'm not, for sure. I mean, I can barely draw things, right? I can come up with things, but I'm mainly a sculptor. But drawing things is challenging, and you need a style and you need practice, and it's just like playing the guitar. So it's like, hey, I'm going to have a wedding. I need a guitarist. You're not going to say, oh, I just need, a Bluetooth speaker, and then we'll play it. We'll have this AI guitarist just play stuff there. Although that might even work. In fact, I was at a concert the other day where we'll go into that in a minute, where I was kind of like, is AI, can you get AI to do this? Because it would probably be more interesting. The things you're doing look like it because you're just twiddling. Anyway, maybe that's a different topic. But the conundrum I have is that I have this class and there's a person responsible for making it look good, which I think is a terrible job, but fine, great, good. Employment is good. I'm all for employment. And I think the reason I'm bringing this up is we can say on a wide range, employment within the arts, right, is one thing that I think artists fear for maybe good reason, right? Because once you make it easier for someone else to say, oh, I just need an illustration of this, and this, instead of verbally telling somebody that, you tell the AI and it'll usually come up with a fairly good job. Anything you can articulate, right, is, it's fairly good at that. Stylistically, people could have a hard time, but we can get into that one in a minute. And tonally, I think it's hard, right? That if you have it and it's too good, that also can be problematic. So my take and what I wondered, because I have to talk to them in a minute, is that my class is on AI, so the header has that sort of AI look. And I don't know how to describe this to you, but I don't know. It was all trained on Mobius drawings or sci-fi covers or something, because everything has this weird look to me that always reminds me of that, right? The tone is always sci-fi. And then what she did is she took a human and then she took a robotic human and then put the title of the thing in it next to it. So it's like a title card, right? And if you've ever seen we can also talk. I just got to see a Charlie Chaplin movie the other day that I really liked, and I was thinking how you didn't need any title cards. It's a weird thing to say, but it's a silent movie, and it gets across the idea pretty well. Very rarely do you need to stop and have some words there to tell you what's going on because you know what's going on.
Mm.
But back to her work, I want to say I said, well, the beginning of the class isn't about robots; it's about people. And so having this little androidy looking thing to me is the wrong tone. And I said this and I was just, I didn't want to be critical, but I'm like, this is the problem of being an artist is you have to infer the right tone and that's how you do your work, right? You understand the client, you understand the tone, and then you deliver based on the tone. And if you ever do something that you think is really cool or copy some other artist that you like, you're really risking it because that's probably not the tone. It's probably not the right tone.
Yeah.
Anyway, the reason I bring it up is I'm going to say it again today because I don't know that anyone of my students would care that tonally this is the wrong message. Probably none of them. But I care, But I'm also an artist. Like I could do this myself, but I also think, am I also reacting to the fact that I know the effort expenditure was extremely low? If she had been there drawing painstakingly, by hand and illustrating this robot or whatever, you see what I mean? Would I feel differently? And I think that isn't a bad question for you. What do you think? Because the point I was trying to get at is the effort meaningful anymore? Like I really worked hard on this thing that is not very impactful.
Yeah.
And well, what do you think? Does any of that make sense? Because I know my opinion on this, but what do you think? Are we setting up anything interesting in terms of an AI conundrum, or is this just,
Well, so I'm kind of thinking about how would I write a prompt to an AI system to actually answer the question, right? I mean, it's if you care about people, that is a huge direction, right? Like if you are really kind of interested in kind of the human component in this AI environment, then it's a very strong kind of direction, and the AI would respond really well. And if I'm hearing you correctly, maybe your human assistant was really not kind of catching that particular, because they will have probably their own biases, right? In that person, right, will
oh,
understand
100%.
AI.
Trust me. I've worked in
Yeah.
advertising for years. Well, that's why. It's that you can't be neutral, right? You've put effort into your skill set. And you can't just come at it like, oh, well, maybe, again, it's like being John Williams. It's going to be hard for him to do a score with a jazz combo, right?
Yeah.
It's just not his thing because it's like, wait, improv? Wait, you're going to improv? You see what I mean? It would just not work for him. And that's because it's not, that's not his area. And you wouldn't expect it. But if you go back to Andre Previn, who was a big classical conductor, he was in a jazz band. Like he would play, I don't remember his instrument, but remember this guy, Andre Previn? He was married to Mia Farrow for a while, and he was the conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic or something. I don't know.
Yeah, big guy.
World famous, but big jazz guy, which was weird because he's, a classical conductor. But these are the strange things, right? Like that you could do both. In any case, what I'm saying is if you are just prompting a computer, I'm now more and more I have a problem with it, right? Because then it's either got to be better than usual. Maybe that's my problem, right? Shouldn't it be pretty good if you're just getting a computer to do it? Or is it impossible for it to be good because the tropes of how it, like you said, describing tone and style, I've tried this before. I have many artists that I want to emulate, so I always use them and say, in the style of X, give me this, and it's not good at it because I don't think that's a pretty loose coupling, if you know what I mean. Like this artist's technique, it knows what it looks like, I guess is what I'm saying, or knows the value of some pixels or whatever, but again, I don't have that necessarily with language, right? Like, I don't know. This is maybe just a getting into the soul because we also have video now, and we've seen this. It's kind of impressive at first, and we've got a fair amount of TV commercials. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're very obviously AI.
Hmm.
Have you seen them?
No, yeah, I have to say that I'm not watching TV at all. I'm kind of completely unplugged from cable, but I'm kind of thinking what the solution might be, and it's kind of very hard. I mean, let's say the AI or the human, or the human, both of them kind of came up with something that is really excellent, right? I mean, but let's say it's something that looks like maybe Guernica, right? Picasso's, famous painting. It's in every single textbook. Everybody knows it, right? The style and everything. Right. So is it good, right? Is it something that you would accept as, let's say, the artwork that would support your class, right? Without actually knowing the importance of it and knowing the lineage and the and everything that comes, the history of it, right? So it's very difficult to judge. I mean, if I look at that painting, it's very difficult to kind of like remove all the biases and kind of like say, okay, it's great. Right. I probably wouldn't be able to say that because I would say it's great only because I've seen it so many times in every book that I've read about art. So probably, it must be great. Right. So it's a very difficult thing to decide. Right. Like what is going to be the actual stylistic content that you would be satisfied with, and the AI would have to infer it, and your human kind of assistant would have to be at the same level. And then even if we go beyond style, then there is also the question of the content, right? So what's the symbolism that would actually be appropriate, right? Is it going to be something that about the people, so maybe kind of mixing the classical thing, maybe something from Greek mythology that we can kind of plug into this, like kind of like, hey, AI might be this kind of some sort of a god, that we are talking about, and it's going to be very impactful. So let's kind of treat it that way. I mean, there's an infinite amount of choices there. So I guess maybe the answer is that instead of just looking at one design, maybe looking at 100 of them might be something that is the kind of the way to go in the current technological environment.
Well, you come across what I would consider to be the way you do this in real life is you do the threes. It's always the threes.
Yeah.
It's the idea is you have a terrible idea, you have what you think is a really good idea, and then you have whatever. It's like, and then you go to the client and you ask them, what appeals to them, and what you're really doing isn't necessarily what people think. You're trying to suss out what your client's tastes are, right? Like I'll make dinner. I mean, we can talk about food in a second, but it's the same idea, right? Is that I just made this one thing and you're going to eat it or you're not going to eat it. You know what I mean? But if I go to a restaurant, it means you can have your chicken burger with a lettuce bun, and I can have my whatever. Like, we have a convention in this, is that we want more options. And amusingly, I went out to eat with my daughter the other night, and then we went to a concert, which I told you, a lot of knob twiddling, which was fine, but sometimes it's like you could go on forever. It's like, what, there's, you don't get tired. So when one of the acts went on a little long. But no, we went out and I was just talking about the kind of diet I was on, and the one thing that was interesting on the menu was some beans, and I was like, oh yeah, I would just get these beans. You could get a hamburger, you could get beans, you could get some sort of fish or whatever. And what was interesting is that I looked over to another table, and there was a father and his son, and the son was maybe 8 or 9-ish, young. And the food came, and it was a basket of fries because my daughter wanted French fries, and I'm like, no, we're getting bread. Don't get on it anyway. I was very preachy to her, and I was paying, so it's better. But I looked over, they got their big basket of fries, and then they got this hamburger, and these are $20 hamburgers, right? The new normal now. And here's this fairly big hamburger, and then that was for the son. And then the dad got a piece of salmon or something, and I was looking over just because I was like, there's no way on earth a kid this size needs this much food, right? Like you need a quarter of this amount of food at best, because that's plenty for this sized person, right? But they're getting, in a sense, 3 times, 4 times as much food put in front of them, which I'm like, well, that's tonally wrong. You see what I'm trying to say? Like this is a fancy restaurant, it has really good food, but this food isn't appropriate for this kid. And maybe it isn't even appropriate for my kid, because when we got our beans, it was funny because we just got this like kind of little pile of beans. It was like, gee, for $20, you'd think you could get a few more beans, because the funny thing is I had just made beans almost exactly like this and had 2 sets of friends over. One set one day, one set another, and I fed them all from the same thing of beans, because that was what was good about it, that I can make a lot of it, and they were good. Anyway, it was just funny because of economics of it, right? Here's to me a nice, easy, delicious food fed 6-8 people, which I think if we ever went into food, is my idea that we've lost our food culture for this reason, that we used to do that, and going out to eat was special and probably bad for you. But you would at home most days you would have something that was more foundational and nutritious, and then I think we sort of ended up wherever we are. But it's not an AI convo. Well, it should be. Someday AI will hopefully get us to do our grocery lists with more thought behind it or something. I don't know. It could.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, long-winded way of saying the doing the 3 is just like, hey, who is your audience and what would they like, right? So we know the kid would like a burger and something, but they don't need this burger at this level, right? They need probably to have split that with their dad. That to me is what is probably appropriate, or they could say that to them. I think I've gone way tangentially off for you, but any thoughts to this?
Well, so if the size
you want
of
to
the
rein me in, Jack.
So if the size of the burger is an equivalent of the amount of tokens that you are willing to spend on the output from the AI, then yeah, that's a very relevant analogy. I think but we are only at the beginning, I think, of this. I mean, the burgers or amounts of tokens will kind of keep growing, especially if we're gonna start seriously treating art as a medium, and multimodal output is going to be the way to go. Maybe generatively created motion picture films, that kind of stuff. It's going to be and then it might be on the under the fingertips. So I think, yeah, I don't know exactly what to tell you or how to help you with your conundrum, other than, because addressing biases, addressing preferences, a terribly difficult thing. So but yeah, I mean, I agree with you that having a name, right, kind of in that particular game is kind of useful, right? If you are let's say a great architect like Norman Foster, I doubt he needs to show up with 3 designs, to a meeting. He just needs to probably say, hey, I'm Norman Foster, and here's what I want to build, and there you go. That's your skyscraper design. I guess the lesson to work on is to kind of work on our I guess cloud, right? I mean, maybe that's something to
Well, or
focus
to
on.
go to a next level, because I'm glad you brought up architecture. There was a great,
Mm.
unfortunately, she died. I think it's Zed. I'm going to get her name wrong, but anyway, I just saw a big explanation of her work, and I wasn't really familiar with it. And it's very organic looking, very interesting work. But what was essential to it was her manner of drawing, because what she said, which I agree with, is she said, we're lying. Like, these drawings are not real, right? These are just representations that are meant to communicate. And so if you did an elevation and you used perspective, right, that's just fake. Like, things don't work. It's an illusion, right, that we came up with and we're familiar with.
Mm.
But it's not a useful illusion for sculpture, I think, is her idea. And she
Mm.
really is a sculptor. She's a sculptor
Mm.
of space and interior and exterior space. Very impressive to me. Um, I honestly should remember her name better, so anyone here can look up her work. But what they were going into were her drawings. So what she decided to do was a different kind of drawing. So she was using very simple geometric structures, but she said, like, well, once you have a trapezoid, right? Once you have this shape, it looks like it's three-dimensional. It's just the way our brains work, right? If you put lines against them, it'll look like a cube, even though it's not. It's just some trapezoids. Okay, so
Mm.
what she did is, in her drawings, her actual drawings that were to be built, she would use all these conventions of trapezoids and such
Mm.
to fake the way it would look. And the example is that the one of her shapes, which may be a roof line,
Mm.
if you're next to it in one angle, it's completely out of proportion, right? It's really long and then it's very skinny at the end. But if you look at it from another angle, it looks like a flat roof.
Mm.
So what she did is she changed what her drawings meant. And to me, this is real art, right? Like, when you change your vocabulary of how you communicate your ideas, then you're up there, right? And that's what I wonder. I guess what I'm thinking, and maybe the topic, and I think I can use your ideas here, because I think the idea of we copy, that's how we become artists, right? Or we copy, we become writers, whatever we do artistically is always going to be referential. And what we may do after a while is consider some people, like, or say Guernica is significant, meaning everyone knows it, and so therefore I can reference it, right? Like, I can not copy it, but I can use that style to remind you of this idea. And then that becomes pretty sophisticated, right? Because people will recognize that you're not copying Picasso, but you're referencing Picasso. And I think that's exactly where, like you said, with this token issue, or maybe it's with training, referential is very hard for AI, right? Like, it's not, I don't think it's very good at knowing where it's getting its ideas. And I'm positive that's true of writing, right? It doesn't say necessarily, maybe the newer models do if they're trying to be more factual, right? They're going to quote something, but really it doesn't know, like, where things came from. It just knows predictive things, right? Like, that there's nothing. Let there be light.
Mm.
We all know where it came from, but you can just say that. It doesn't have any more meaning than the words on the page. But if you say that and it's the first thing it says, we'll take it as being odd, right? We're back to this tone thing. Wrong tone.
Mm.
You're using words and ideas that aren't appropriate to what you're trying to convey. And I don't know that we could ever really get away from that, no matter how sophisticated the models are, right? It never is really going to know that it's not appropriate. And the reason I bring up this TV commercial, with AI, how somehow all these impossible uh, kind of motion things look really easy in AI. That's the problem, right? It never has the issue. I don't know if you've ever seen, like, how they made Toy Story or things like that, but one of
Mm.
the most fascinating ones was where the toy soldiers had to jump off and land in front of Buzz or something like that. And then they showed it and they said, well, what we had to do is that the models jump, but then we move them quickly underneath this thing, and then we pull these other ones out that have the parachutes. Like they had to, in sort of not real world, but in pseudo real world, fake this look because they couldn't do what you could do in the real world, which is unfurl a uh, right. There's no air there. There's nothing to unfurl, but they figured that was the easiest way, right, to transition in this shot. And so just like in movies where the person's body, speaking of Alien, has things bursting out of it, right? He's there, but that's not his body, right? That's so, but we're fine with that. We're like, well, it looks like him, it looks like his body, looks like his arm moving, and maybe that's why we always end up with magic, right? We'll go back to magic, right? Magic tricks are that it's fake, but you are still impressed. And maybe you don't know how the magic was done. And perhaps that's what we have to focus on, I think, if in this what we call the surviving AI, right? Which is that it can't do these things, right? Like that is just kind of what we do, and we just have to double down that we do that.
Yeah, well, and perhaps kind of maybe a way to get closer to what you would like to see is massive AI-driven customization. I mean, at work, we are deploying right now those educational agents that will be helping students to kind of deal with course materials and stuff like that. Maybe next year there is going to be a different conversation. It's not just going to be about the files, but it's going to be about the course content, including the page that students look at when they are kind of, looking for a home assignment. And, maybe my preference will be that there is going to be something like a Arkanoid, maybe kind of like little monster kind of showing, or maybe a Tetris kind of like analogy somewhere in there, and maybe somebody else's will be, like T800, kind of exemplifying the AI, and kind of showing, a robot. So I think maybe there is that answer, but that probably also means that in all the variety, for you, the satisfying solution is going to be a very small percentage of the possible outcomes.
Well, I will continue to double down on this tone. I think that's what really interests me most of all, right? Which is it's ineffable. It's very contextual. And it's probably different obviously it's different for everyone. Just like you said, it's a really good point. Like the tone that appeals to me may be, and in fact, I will tell you, going to the show, which was a lot of experimental music, let's put it that way. There was no very, what do we call it? No good drummer involved, right? Like it's mainly a bunch of sequencers and a bunch of whatever gadgets, right? I happen to see this music a lot and I really like it, but it's the thing that bothers me, of course, is the effort involved, right? So if you have to understand, like, has the audience, are they getting more excited or are they getting less excited? And I think that's the fun of being a performer. And you could play one tune in front of someone, which I did see someone, it's a completely improvised thing where they just made a lot of droney racket for a while, but after a while it got better. Like everyone kind of settled into it, and everybody was really, including the musicians, were enjoying it a lot more because it's just loop after loop after loop after feedback. It just gets to be a thing that you created. And it was fun when it ended too, because you're like, wow, you can just, in a sense, birth this thing, but it takes the audience a while to come around. Whereas if you're just doing this thing where it's like bleep, bleep, and then it kind of fades out, and then, oh, is it going to be over? No, another one comes in, bleep, bleep, bleep. Like we kept doing that with this one performer, and I kept thinking like, well, this is the one that really gets to you. Like it just stays the same. Audience is getting restless. Read the room. This is a good time to end, but then when they keep going, Yeah.
Mm.
And in terms of being augmented by AI, there's a great artist who I really like who actually invented an entire response system. So whatever he played, the response would play another tune or play another note or play another series of notes, right? So it was like sort of a reactive system. And I don't know the exact mechanics, but he did this with more primitive things. But I always wonder, maybe we can get into this someday or next time around. Is like when you start to collaborate with AI, as I do often, you do feel a
Mm.
certain um, they have a what is the word, like predilections. They have a tone. They set a tone. They do it for you because they want you to be engaged, but they also um, start to have a little bit of a personality, right? Which is engaging with or kind of contradict. Like they're sort of like teachers, right? Like as both of us are. We come to it with a role. We're not ourselves. We're pretending to be this other person. So when someone comes to us, we have to kind of give that context and say, yeah, you're frustrated with learning this long division or whatever, but I know you can do it. You just have to keep it up. Here, maybe here's a few more exercises and it'll click sooner or later, kind of like with the noise, right? And sometimes they're just see it as being over and over, I'm never going to get this. And thus the poor quality of our math education, right? People just give up on it. And maybe you're right. AI could be this thing. It could just continually recontextualize things. But I don't think it's ever going to be, I don't know, they keep thinking or saying how it's solved gold box conjecture, or, something to do with how AI is really clever. And I'm like, yeah, not really. I mean, people are clever. and maybe you can get it to fill in a gap, but probably most likely it's the person coming up with this has a real insight, and that's the important part, not solving it.
Yeah. That digital sequencer music analogy is kind of a good one. I dub with it a little bit as well. I have a few sequencers and
Yeah,
synthesizers.
it's
Yeah, and
endlessly fun. You can play
yeah,
it
it's
for
a yeah, and
hours,
there
but when
is
you have an audience,
yeah, and the question of a tone it kind of becomes there. Like how do you capture that if you have a pattern, right? Like kind of like analogy here. Okay, how do I capture the tone in my hand? Is there is only a pencil, right? And if you have only one tool in your hand, then there's not so many dimensions to choose from, right? I mean, still, it might be still a big set because I can do a drawing of a, in this style or that style. The same with a sequencer. It's kind of like a very I have that clock basically that's ticking, and I can kind of do something with that clock. But finding a tone in that tool is equally hard as a tone in your pencil drawing. But if you have a palette of of oil colors, now you are expanding that, right? And the analogy in music is kind of similar, right? You kind of maybe you hook up a synthesizer to your sequencer, and now you have a palette. Now you can start building the colors with the music and with the sounds. So yeah, that kind of makes a lot of sense to me, but still very hard thing to do. Like building something that is appropriate, right? Maybe unique, right? Something that is recognizable. Extremely difficult thing to do.
well, and maybe that's a good ending because I still think while it's difficult to do, it isn't. It's not fun. I think that's a important part, right? It's the fun part that people like doing that. We don't have to talk about Wolfram, but you know what I mean. There's just
Mm.
people who really like this kind of thing, right? Like it all to them is fun, you know, and to others it might seem daunting, but that's why we go into this is because we do enjoy it, right? And doing something enjoyable, even though it's challenging.
Well, maybe this is something that we can kind of forward to our next meeting, because I might have a little bit of a disagreement with you. I mean,
Oh, good.
there is stories of famous artists, like Steve Vai, one of the best guitarists. He's talking about, his fingers bleeding after the recording session because there's so many takes and retakes, or Mike Oldfield, his Tubular Bells
Yeah.
record. He basically had a mental breakdown in the middle of the recording. He couldn't take it anymore. And yes, what came out of it is kind of a brilliant piece of music, but it was such a terrible pain to kind of make it happen. So there might be possibly there might be an angle where we can kind of find that will kind of show us that building art is actually a very painful process, very, very hard and painful process, even though it might be starting as a fun kind of occupation. Oh, I'm going to be a guitarist, right? Or I'm going to be a painter.
Sure.
But but then the actual production kind of becomes a really hard process.
Okay, let's definitely put that on the. I love the topic about because it's one of my other things about play that I've been trying to understand because I do think that there's um, a great role for AI in play. I just haven't figured it out yet, right? And play has to do a lot with what you're talking about, the frustrations that come from execution of complicated or even not so complicated ideas, right? So let's
Mm.
hold that one for next time. I like it, Jack. Let's remember it. Fun, play, and the challenges, right? The challenges of it all. All we can say is that we're all happy not to have to do this in assembly, right? We just let this stuff
Yeah.
do it for us, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah,
even if we had
definitely true.
ASCII art in assembly, it's fun, but not really. You know what I mean?
No,
You
not really.
still are too low level. All right. Well, till
Yeah.
next time, Jack. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. See you next time.